What is up, guys? It's your boy Show, back with another video on Marvel Strike Force, and today we are talking about Blitz. Now, why is Blitz important? It's because it is a very important game mode that you need to stay on top of, and if you don't, you are missing out on a lot of new potential characters, and you're not going to be able to use them at a usable level. Also, sometimes these new characters that get released via Blitz are sometimes characters that you need for legendary events. So recently there's been a lot of speculation that X-Force might be the team that's required for the next legendary event. This might not be the case, it may be the case, we're not too sure yet. There's nothing that's been officially announced, but it's just a rumor going by. But as you can see, if you don't get your characters up to maybe at least 5 stars, then you might miss out on a potential legendary character. And when these legendary characters drop, sometimes you will not see them again and have an opportunity to unlock them until at least 3 months maybe. So you definitely want to get these characters the first time round and be using them so you have an advantage in game modes like War, Arena, Raids and Dark Dimension. Another reason why we are going over Blitz and it's important is because it will save you money in the long run. When new characters drop, they are not cheap, they are actually quite expensive, and this is a very expensive game, probably the most expensive game I've ever played actually. So if you want to save money, you need to improve your Blitz rank. If you don't want to spend money, that's the way it works in this game. If you don't want to spend the time playing, then there are little ways to get around that by spending money, but when you spend money, you're spending quite a lot. So you want to know the best ways to rank really high, so you don't always have to drop your wallet in and burn it. When you buy these packs, the outcome is randomly generated. You do not know what you will get from these orbs if you do go and buy the packs for these characters. So if you get a really bad pull, you need to know how to blitz efficiently to make sure you get these characters to at least 5 stars or at least close to it, because typically when these legendary events occur, you need to have 5 characters at 5 stars, with the exception being Phoenix, who for some reason required a 6-star unlock, but the rest of the characters apart from her have been 5 stars, so you want to be getting as close to 5 stars as possible or getting 5 stars. Okay, tip number 1 is organize and know your roster. Now in Blitz you can save squads and you can organize them in whatever way you want. You want to be taking advantage of this feature because it's going to help you save a lot of time and make sure that you rank in a higher position. Time is of the essence when you're blitzing, and you need to be getting in those rotations in very frequently. So you want to make sure that you have as wide of a roster as possible, and you want to make sure that you're using meta teams and having characters that are balanced. And if your characters aren't balanced, you at least want the damage dealer of the team to be higher than your other characters. So what do I mean by this? So for example, on the Inhumans team, you want Black Bolt to ideally be your strongest character on that team, and Yo-Yo. The reason being is because if your damage dealer isn't a very high level, you're going to struggle to do damage to the opposition, and they'll probably be able to take you out quicker than you're able to take them out. Whereas if you have a high damage dealer like Black Bolt in your team on the Inhumans team, then he can take out a character very quickly, meaning that you're already at an advantage in the game. Another example of a team that's like this is X-Men. Phoenix is a very important character for that team. Without her, the team would not perform as well as they do. So she is like the glue that puts that team together, and when she is at a high level, she can do so much damage, and she's not just valuable in that team, she's valuable in other game modes. She is very valuable in Dark Dimension, and she pretty much like just covers pretty much almost half of Dark Dimension. So she is not a character that you will regret building up to a very high level, even if it makes some balancing issues on your X-Men team. Right, and the final thing I will say once you have got a wide enough roster and several teams unlocked is organize your teams from lowest power to highest power, because at the start, when you first start your blitzing, you're going to be at tier 1 and the wins are going to be quite easy to come by no matter what team you use. So you want to get your weak teams out the way first, because they're not going to be as useful to you when you get to tier 8 and tier 8.3. That's when you want your higher powered teams and your more reliable teams to take the role and to start getting you points, because they're going to be the teams that get you the big points in Blitz and the teams that get you closer to ranking very, very high in Blitz. Okay, the next tip we're going to get into is your settings. So for new players, this is probably something that you're not currently aware of. If you are, then fair play to you and well done. But a lot of late game players probably know about this already, but I know some new players might not be. And it is your settings or options, whatever you want to call it. And it might be that you don't have some certain options ticked that will help save you a lot of time in Blitz. So if you come over to this little cog or gear symbol in the top right hand corner of your screen and click on that, and then scroll down to advanced, and then you want to make sure that you have cycle through save squads in the Blitz menu ticked. Now the reason for that is because it's going to save you a lot of time when you're changing from team to team, which you're going to be doing a lot when you're blitzing. So to put it in perspective, if we go over to Blitz and we go through, we can see how quickly we can go through our teams from top to bottom just like that for each matchup. And if you have this organized in a nice way, then you just have to keep clicking on the side to work your way up your roster. Whereas if you didn't have that ticked, then let's just say we've just started Blitz and then we've selected this team. Let's say we finished our matchup and we need to go to our next team. Then this is the way you would do this if you didn't have this ticked, and this is not a very quick way. So you would have to go from the top of your organized save squads all the way to the bottom every single matchup until you've worked your way to the top, and that isn't the most time efficient way. So you definitely want to make sure you have this slider ticked and you're using it once you've organized your teams, so that you're saving a lot of time, because like I said, Blitz is a very time efficient game mode and you don't want to be spending too long. You want to be in and out just like that. Now you'll also notice that I have enable low graphics combat mode ticked as well. That's just to reduce the lag and the chance of you crashing during your playtime, and that can help in raids, arena, pretty much any game mode. So I just always have that ticked anyway. I'm not too concerned about the graphics, I'm more concerned about actually playing the game. So Foxnext or Scopely have said that, you know, if you have this option ticked, then it can help reduce the risk of you being kicked out of the game or frozen while you're playing. So I just have this ticked at all times anyway, especially because it can be more detrimental for the game to freeze in competitive game modes like War, and it can be very frustrating when that happens, but it can also be useful for Blitz. So the next thing about your settings that is holding you back is your in-game options. So as you can see, I have the 3x dynamic camera turned off. Now if you leave that on, then it's going to show the animations. Even if it's sped up 3 times, it's still going to show some of the animations, and this is going to actually slow down your game time, and it's going to mean that you're blitzing for a little bit longer because you're letting the animations play through. So you want to make sure that is turned off, and that now leads on to the next tip, is making sure that you are playing on 3x speed, which you can see in the top left corner. And you want to make sure that when you're blitzing, that pretty much at all times you are playing at ×3 speed, because it's going to mean that you're playing for less time, which means that you're blitzing a lot more quickly in a short span of time. Going for a rotation on Blitz takes quite a bit of time if you've got a big roster, so you want to make sure that you're going through your roster as quickly as possible. So that's a bit more of an obvious tip that I'm sure some new players have picked up on already, but if you didn't, then that's a tip that you want to immediately correct when you're blitzing. Now, another mistake that you are probably doing when you are blitzing, and I would say this applies to new players as well, especially if you've not played a type of game like this before, is that stop playing every single matchup. I know the animations are cool, and I know sometimes it's really exciting when you first start playing, but when it comes to Blitz, you will get burnt out very quickly, especially if you want to rank up really high in Blitz. So stop playing every matchup. Even if you don't enjoy the animations, stop playing every single matchup. And what you should do instead is take advantage of the auto option. This option is there for a reason, and if you're not using it, you're going to probably get burnt out very quickly if you're having to play every single matchup. Some teams can auto very reliably, and a good team that can do that is Black Order. But if you don't have Black Order, then the X-Men team with Phoenix included pretty much autos 90% of the time. It's quite rare that I'll lose there. If I do lose, I'll just come back and, you know, we'll build back up. But don't be afraid to lose. Sometimes it happens when you auto, but you're going to go through your roster and your rotation a lot quicker if you use the auto feature and you're playing on ×3 speed rather than if you're playing every matchup. That's a definite. Unless you can click very, very quickly, you are probably going to save a lot more time using the auto feature. And that brings us to our final tip, which is losing. Now, sometimes when you get to tier 8.3 especially, things might go wrong, and there are some teams that you might need to play just because they can't auto when it comes to 8.3. When it comes to 8.3, that's when you get the teams that are the most difficult to take out, and sometimes it can be very difficult to win matchups there. So for example, if I took Wakandans to 8.3, they're probably going to struggle, and that is a team that will often not be able to compete in 8.3. So sometimes you will need to lose matchups. But if you don't want to drop your rank, then one thing you can do is if you come over to your settings, and if you press the quit battle option over here, you have an option to retreat or lose the battle. Now if you click on the red one which says lose the battle, then you will drop down in your rank. But if you retreat, then what will happen is you will maintain your rank, but the team that you went in with will be on cooldown with either option actually. So your team will be on cooldown with either option, but if you use the retreat, it means that you maintain your rank. Now when you get to 8.3, you have two options. You can retreat and maintain your rank. I sometimes use this option if I know I've got some short to win teams that I know can definitely compete in 8.3. But if I'm working down my roster and I've got a bunch of teams like Wakandans or my Sinister Six team, which isn't as powerful, then sometimes I will actually deliberately drop down. And this button can also be useful for events such as the one happening right now. So it can be useful for the Chimichangas event, I don't know how to pronounce it, but yeah. Or it can be useful for the event that just went by, which was the Unity Orbs event, where you just want to drop down, you don't want to rank up too high. The most important thing is blitzing as much as possible. So these two buttons can be quite useful, and I would definitely take advantage of this, because when I first started playing this game, you weren't able to do this, so take advantage of these options. So they're the tips that I would recommend for yourself. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is Blitz Charges. Now these are going to play an important role in ranking high, and if you want to rank high, you are probably going to need these. But I know a lot of people sometimes miss out on high rankings in Blitz because they don't save their charges and they don't use them properly. So one thing I will say is stop using your Blitz charges early. you want to use them once you have finished your rotation for free, which happens after a 2-hour cooldown. So you want to make sure that you don't use your Blitz Charges, don't burn them out straight away. Finish your rotation free of charge, and then start using your Blitz Charges. So I don't use them until I've gone through all of my save squads, because you don't need them straight away. And when I do use them, once I finish my rotation, I try to avoid using them on weak teams, and I try and save as many as I can for the use of meta teams like my X-Men team, like my Black Order, my Asgardians, the ones that are more reliable. And I like to use those teams in particular when I'm getting close to 8 or 8.3, because I know that they're quite reliable and they have a high win rate. So you want to make sure you're saving your Blitz Charges for your big teams, because those are the teams that are going to earn you the most points, which means you rank higher. When you use your charges on these teams, the cost starts at 25 every time you do it, every time. However, after a few turns, I think it might be 4 or 5 turns, then the cost goes up by about 50. And then after another 4 or 5 turns, it goes up to, I think, 100. Now, you want to stop as soon as it gets to 50. Stop, because you're going to burn through charges way too quickly if you carry on when it costs about 50 Blitz Charges to use that team. So when it gets to 50, stop, move on to the next meta team that's quite reliable, and do the same thing. So once X-Men cost me about 50 Blitz Charges, move on to the next team, which might be your Asgardians or it might be your Black Order team, and repeat that process. Another thing that I would say is quite important is save your Blitz Charges in preparation. So if you know, typically Fox Next or Scopely will tell you the upcoming blitzes in advance. So we know that an X23 blitz is soon coming up. So what you should be doing is you should be saving your Blitz Charges in preparation for that. Ordinarily, I would have a lot more Blitz Charges, but as we have this event going on, I'm going through them quite quickly. But I know I'll build them up hopefully before this event ends. So you want to make sure that you've got enough Blitz Charges in preparation for this big character that's going to be released via Blitz, because you're going to need these to rank up high. So you can collect these on, I believe, Sunday through the medical supply run, on Monday, and I think on Thursday over here in the UK, that is. It might be different in the country you're in, but it will typically run around those days or very close to it. So you want to make sure that you're refreshing and taking advantage of these challenges to make sure you have enough Blitz Charges to go really hard and rank high in Blitz. Okay, so the next tip I want to talk about is the Tier Multiplier. So when you get to tier 8.3, that's typically where you're going to find the most difficult matchups, and there is a chance that things will go wrong and you will not always win, but it's also the place where you get the most points. So with this, it's optional. Some players I know like to drop down to tier 7, or they like to drop down to tier 8 and then work their way back up to 8.3 and then drop down again. That is a method that you can use. Or others don't drop at all and they stay at 8.3 and they live by 8.3 and they die by 8.3. You can use whichever method you want. I typically stay at 8.3 and I use a lot of my reliable teams like X-Men, Black Order, Asgardians, but when I start to work further down my roster and I'm at 8.3 and I've used all my meta teams, that's typically when I might consider dropping down, because I know that some of my weaker teams just cannot find good matchups at 8.3, and I don't want to spend the time spending ages just to find a perfect matchup for my Wakandans, because they're not that great at 8.3. So that's typically when I might consider dropping down. to maybe 8 or even 7, but I don't like to go any further down than 8. So that's when I might drop down to try and find some good matchups. So I'm still getting points, not as much as 8.3, but I'm still getting points, and I'm using my whole roster. So that bit is up to you. You can do whatever you want at that stage. So I know Torna likes to go from 7 to 8.3, but that bit is entirely up to you. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is matchups. Now, you want to be careful when you're in 8.3, especially with matchups, because if you pick a bad matchup, you will quickly find yourself in a sticky situation, and you would have wasted a team, and now you've got to wait 2 hours because it now costs 50 charges to use that team, and now you've got to wait 2 hours to use them. So you want to be careful with matchups. So I typically avoid X-Men teams with Phoenix in there, teams with a high level Captain Marvel, and teams with Ultron in it sometimes, because these are characters that will cause a lot of problems for you when you're going up against them. So you want to avoid problematic teams in Blitz. And another top tip is to avoid teams that have just come out, because typically they're going to be better than most old teams. So I typically try and avoid brand new teams that have just been released, because they're sometimes quite difficult to take out because there's not enough data on them. So that's something you want to be aware of. And a little feature I want to show you is if you go to the show stats button here, it will tell you the power of each of the opponent's characters. So you can see that on this team that Punisher is the strongest character. So if I had a team with all villains, I would need to be quite careful of Punisher, because Punisher can just completely destroy villains. So you want to be kind of mindful of that, because sometimes when you get a Captain Marvel, for example, and you check this, she might be 7 red stars, and she could completely just one-shot one of your characters out the window. Or it could be the opposite, where she could be really low, but maybe there's another character that's really strong with loads of red stars, but they're not as important. So you just want to check this, because sometimes you might get a team that isn't a meta team, but there might be one character in particular that if they did have high red stars, they could pose a problem, or they might not pose a problem. So you want to check that feature. Okay, speaking of characters, one character that I want to speak about, and this will apply more to mid-game to end-game players, is Ultron. Now, Ultron is, although he's been power creeped a little bit because of the red star change, and he's come down in the pecking order a little bit, he's still quite a valuable character. And in terms of where you should use him, you can still use him in several different teams. So it's entirely up to you where you want to put him. I personally put him on my Marauders team. Now you can put him on pretty much any team and he will pretty much work. So sometimes what I might do, even though he's on my Marauders team, sometimes what I might even do is my defenders are really strong, because when I started playing this game, defenders were the go-to team. So as you can see, they're like super strong. So sometimes I don't get the best matchup with defenders because they're no longer the best team, but they still earn me a lot of points. So sometimes what I might do is I might take Luke Cage off the team, for example, and put Ultron there, and he actually works really well on this team because he's still a really good character and can work on a lot of teams. But by placing him here when I'm at maybe tier 8.3 means that I've increased the chance of me winning, because sometimes when I use defenders I don't get the best matchup, but if I was to put Ultron on there, then it can turn the tables a little bit. So use Ultron carefully and think carefully where you want to place him, because he's still a valuable character. So that's just one tip I want to say. Okay, now if you made it this far, then thank you very much for watching, and if any of the tips have helped you so far, then please consider dropping this video a like and subscribing to the channel. It really does help, and I really want to try and grow this channel and produce some better content for you guys. And when you guys like and subscribe, it really motivates me to produce videos. So let's get on to the last tip, and this is a tip that I think is quite important, especially when it comes to Blitz, and that is to have realistic expectations. So one thing I didn't really realize when I first started playing Marvel Strike Force was my expectations and how time consuming Blitz can be, and how much of a role your TCP plays, which stands for Team Collection Power if you're new around here. It plays a massive role in your ranking. Typically the way it goes is the more veteran players will have a way higher team collection power than you, which means they have a wider and stronger roster than you, which means they're more likely to gain points very easily and with ease. Whereas if you're a newer player, you're not going to have the widest roster. Even if you do, they're not going to be fully developed, so you're not going to be getting as much points as, for example, me, who has quite a high team collection power than most players. So that is something you definitely want to bear in mind when you're playing Blitz. Okay, so that is the video in a wrap. I'm sorry that this video has been a very lengthy one. I wanted to thoroughly tackle this and to think of every detail possible that could help you out in Blitz, whether you're a new player or whether you've been playing this game for a while and you didn't know about some of these things. But I just wanted to bring it to your attention and help some people out. So if this video has helped you, then please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. I'm sure you've heard this several times from YouTubers, but it really does help channels grow, and I really want to take this channel to a really high level and improve the content for you guys. So if this video was helpful, then please leave a like and subscribe, and share it to some people in your alliance, because I know there are a lot of new players joining this game, and this video could actually be quite helpful for people in Blitz. Like I said at the start of the video, Blitz is a very important game mode, so if this helped, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends and your alliance mates, share it with your mum, share it with your dad, share it with everybody, and let's get this channel growing, because I really want to get this channel to grow. I want to try and get to 1,000 subscribers and hopefully grow this channel to a really good level. So that's all for today. Thank you guys for watching. Stay safe, and I will see you guys next time.